Imagine a fortress, colossal concrete walls, steel doors that look like they could stop anything, maybe buried deep underground. Sounds pretty secure, right?
Yeah.
Almost. Impenetrable. But what if, for every amazing defense ever built, there's always been someone else, just as clever, just as determined, figuring out how to break it wide open? That's what we're diving into today. This, never-ending race between fortifications and the weapons designed to smash them. From, the huge concrete monsters of World War II, all the way to hidden underground tunnels and, maybe surprisingly, the threat of modern drones. We're looking at how this old contest keeps evolving.
It really is fascinating because, look, the tech changes, the battlefields look totally different, but the basic strategic thinking, why we build these things and then how we try to beat them, it stays remarkably similar. And we've gathered some great sources for historical accounts, modern case studies that really map out this whole evolution. The goal today is, well, to give you that shortcut, cut through the complexity, and help you get a solid handle on this really critical part of warfare.
Okay, so let's start back in World War II. That conflict really felt like the peak of static defense thinking, didn't it? Building fixed strong points.
Absolutely. Nations poured incredible effort into it.
And the Germans, with their Regelbau system, they kind of took it to another level.
Oh, definitely. Regelbau wasn't just about blueprints for bunkers. It was like an industrialized system, standardized construction. Think factory line efficiency, but for building defenses across Europe. The Siegfried Line, the Atlantic Wall, classic examples.
Standardized. What was so clever about that?
Well, it simplified everything. Manufacturing armored parts, ordering materials, logistics for building these massive networks quickly. And it was flexible, too. They could actually adapt designs to use captured weapons, say guns from Czechoslovakia, and just integrate them right in.
Right. And they had that classification system.
Oh, terrific.
For how strong they were.
Exactly. Bausteric building strength. It was their way of, putting a number on protection. So they knew precisely what kind of hit a bunker could take. It ranged from the basic Feldmassig, or Fe, which was just meant for small arms fire, shrapnel, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Up to Verstärkt Feldmassig, VF. Thicker concrete, reinforced, designed to handle maybe a 50-kilogram bomb or 105-millimeter artillery. Still relatively light stuff in the grand scheme.
But then came the serious ones.
Then you get to the standing bunkers, the Saint class. Baustik B used at least 200 centimeters, that's 2 meters of reinforced concrete, built to withstand a half-ton bomb or heavy artillery, like 220-millimeter shells.
Wow.
And Baustik A, that was the top tier. We're talking 350 centimeters, 3.5 meters of reinforced concrete, designed for 1,000-kilogram bombs, the heaviest artillery of the day.
And these weren't just shells, right? They were more like mini bases.
Totally. They were designed to be self-sufficient. Sealed environments, gas-proof doors, air filters, comms, heating, lighting. Some even had their own wells. They were built for soldiers to hold out, isolated for a long time. Real fortresses within the larger defensive line.
It's staggering when you think about the scale. The Atlantic Wall, over 3,000 miles, thousands of these bunkers. Just incredible engineering. But here's the kicker, right? Despite all that effort, all that concrete and steel, it ultimately failed. The Allies broke through. So what went wrong? What was the fatal flaw?
Well, there are a few things. Logistics were a constant headache. Shortages of materials often meant they ended up building simpler, weaker versions than the designs called for. But the biggest issue, arguably, was just how static it all was. These powerful defenses, they just sat there. They could be bypassed, flanked, or simply overwhelmed by a really concentrated, mobile attack. Normandy drove that lesson home hard. A wall is strong, but attackers with enough mobility and, frankly, ingenuity can always find a way around or through it.
Which brings us to the Allied answer. Combined arms. That idea of making infantry, tanks, artillery all work together synergistically.
Exactly. Each element makes the enemy vulnerable to the others.
And the Americans against the Siegfried Line, they had this down to a science almost, a phased approach. First, suppression. Just pounding the defenses with artillery, bombing runs, not necessarily to destroy them outright, but to keep the defenders' heads down.
Pin them down, yeah.
Yeah.
Reduce their ability to fire back effectively.
Then while that's happening, the infantry assault teams move in, covered by tanks, or maybe tank destroyers, those specialized anti-tank vehicles. They'd creep forward, using the bunker's own blind spots, the dead angles, to get close.
Smart tactics, exploiting the inherent limitations of a fixed firing position.
And then the breach.
Oh.
Up close and personal, grenades into firing slits, bazookas against weak points, demolition charges packed against doors or walls, even tanks rolling right up and blasting steel doors point blank.
And you can't ignore the psychological side. Those flamethrower tanks, the British Churchill Crocodile, the American M4 Zippo, just seeing one of those lumbering towards you was often enough to make defenders surrender.
That's terrifying.
It really highlights the paradox, doesn't it? The bunker is immensely strong passively, but up close, that tech advantage disappears. It becomes this brutal, close-in fight, and the defender is trapped inside.
But it wasn't all just about grinding it out on the front lines. The Allies were also thinking bigger picture, attacking from the air in a totally new way. This is where Barnes-Wallace comes in, right? The earthquake bomb guy.
That's him, famous for the bouncing bomb used in the Dam Busters raid, but his earthquake bomb concept was arguably even more revolutionary for the long term. It really set the stage for modern bunker busters.
So these bombs, the Tall Boy and the Grand Slam, massive things, 5, 10 tons. They weren't meant to hit the bunker.
No, that's the genius of it. They were dropped from way up high, went supersonic on the way down, spun for stability. And the idea was for them to slam into the ground next to the target. They had these incredibly tough casings designed to penetrate deep into the earth before exploding.
Creating a what now? A camouflage.
Camouflage, yeah, basically a big underground cavity. The explosion deep underground sends this massive shock wave through the soil, like a localized earthquake. It doesn't blow the bunker up directly, it destroys its foundations, causing it to collapse from underneath.
Wow. So using the ground itself as the weapon.
Precisely. It was a huge intellectual jump.
Yeah.
Shifting from just blowing things up on the surface to this idea of indirect structural failure. Using complex physics, multi-stage effects, it really established the core ideas we still see in advanced munitions today. That concept, born back then, is still evolving.
Okay, so fast forward. World War II teaches some hard lessons about static defenses. In the modern era, you've got incredibly lethal and accurate air power. So what does a modern bunker look like? How's the whole game changed?
Oh, it shifted dramatically. Those visible lines of concrete forts, mostly gone. Now the emphasis is on going deep underground. Covert facilities, buried way down.
Why the shift? Just hiding from bombs.
Largely, yes. But it's not just frontline troops anymore. We're talking about protecting really critical assets, command and control centers, secret manufacturing sites, even continuity of government bunkers for top officials. Surface structures are just too vulnerable now.
But fighting underground, that sounds like a whole different nightmare.
It is. It presents unique and intense challenges. It's dark, confined spaces. Navigation is incredibly difficult, disorienting. And the defenders, they usually have a massive advantage just knowing the layout intimately.
And they can move unseen.
Exactly. Using existing tunnels, ventilation shafts, even sewage systems sometimes, popping up for ambushes, disappearing again. This tactic, mouse-holing, creating hidden passages between areas, we saw it famously in Stalingrad, and it's absolutely still relevant. It's gotten so significant that the U.S. military now officially recognizes underground as its own distinct domain of warfare, like land, sea, air, space, and cyber.
And we saw a really stark, modern example of this play out, didn't we? Azovstal, the steel plant in Mariupol.
Azovstal is a defining case study. It wasn't even designed as a military bunker. It was this huge, sprawling industrial complex, rail lines, warehouses, blast furnaces, but underneath. A vast network of Soviet-era tunnels and deep basements.
And it basically became an urban fortress.
Absolutely, and it showed the strategic power these places can have. The Ukrainian defenders there held out for almost 3 months against a much larger, better-equipped Russian force. It completely bogged them down.
Didn't Putin eventually order them to just blockade it, not storm it?
He did. And that decision was essentially a tactical admission. It showed just how difficult, how costly in lives and resources a direct assault on such a complex subterranean environment would be. It echoed historical sieges, really.
What does that tell us? That any big factory or subway system could become a fortress now?
That's a huge implication, yes. Complex civilian infrastructure can be repurposed into incredibly tough defensive positions, blurring the lines and massively complicating things for an attacking force. And we have to remember the human cost, the psychological dimension. Being trapped down there in Azovstal, constant bombardment shaking the ground, dwindling supplies, the darkness, the damp, the fear of a direct hit obliterating your shelter, the stress is unimaginable. That psychological endurance factor, it's always critical in sieges.
So defenses go deep, they get complex, they leverage existing structures. How have the attacks, the countermeasures, kept pace? Sounds like we've moved beyond just, combined arms and brute force.
We have. We're into the era of smart weapons, really leveraging technology. Modern bunker-buster bombs, they're direct descendants of Barnes-Wallace's ideas: mass, speed, tough casings, but amplified exponentially by technology.
Like what? What's the cutting edge?
Well, you have things like the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP. It's a U.S. weapon, weighs about 30,000 pounds, and it's precision-guided. It's designed specifically to go after deeply buried targets.
And how deep are we talking?
Reports suggest it can potentially penetrate up to 200 feet of earth or maybe 60 feet of reinforced concrete. That's substantial.
So just digging deeper isn't the guaranteed answer anymore.
Not really, because these modern weapons aren't just bigger bombs. They combine that penetrating power with incredible accuracy. We're talking GPS guidance, inertial navigation systems that know where the bomb is, even without GPS, steerable fins. They can hit within meters at a target.
But the really clever bit is the fuse, isn't it?
That's the game changer. It's not just a simple fuse like in WWII. These are smart, computerized fuses. The large penetrator smart fuse, for instance, can actually sense how deep it's gone, maybe even count the layers or floors it punches through.
Seriously, counting floors.
And then detonate at precisely the right depth for maximum damage inside the structure. So yeah, the old strategy of just adding more concrete, making the walls thicker. These weapons are designed to bypass that static strength with sheer precision and intelligent timing.
Okay, so that's the high-tech superpower level. But you mentioned something else earlier, drones.
Yeah.
How do they fit into attacking hardened targets?
Yes. This might be the most disruptive shift of all. And it's not coming from the most expensive end of the spectrum. It's the low-cost, often expendable drone.
We've seen this a lot in the Russia-Ukraine war, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a brutal proving ground. We've seen relatively inexpensive UAVs being used very effectively to bypass defenses and hit high-value, supposedly hardened targets. Things like Russian air bases, expensive radar installations, targets that traditional air forces would struggle to reach without risking pilots and high-cost aircraft.
What makes them so effective against these defended sites?
It's a combination of things. They're small, hard to spot on radar, they often fly low and slow. And crucially, they're cheap enough to be used in large numbers, potentially overwhelming defenses. They can essentially bypass billions of dollars worth of conventional air defense systems, things like the S-300 or Panzer, which are mostly designed for bigger, faster threats like jets or missiles.
Because that video wasn't there of a drone just cruising up to a Russian radar.
Yeah, that anecdote is striking. An FTV first-person view drone operated by Ukrainians just buzzing towards this sophisticated radar installation, and you see a Russian soldier just walking nearby, totally oblivious until the last moment. It really drives home how difficult they are to detect sometimes.
Yeah. So what's the bigger implication here? You called it the democratization of this capability.
It's a profound shift. Think about it. For decades, only major powers with incredibly expensive, precision-guided bombs could reliably threaten deeply buried or hardened targets. Now, a group or a nation with a much smaller budget can potentially achieve a similar strategic effect using mass-produced, relatively cheap drones. It completely changes the cost calculation. Suddenly, building a purely passive fortress becomes almost economically unviable because the cost to attack it effectively has plummeted. There's no passive defense that's too expensive to overcome anymore, it seems. And we see the response, Russia reportedly building new concrete shelters, even putting aircraft under these weird dome structures, specifically trying to counter this drone threat.
So wrapping this all up, it really is this constant, maybe even accelerating cycle. Defense tries something new, the offense finds a counter, rinse and repeat.
That's the core takeaway. Fortifications themselves have changed shape dramatically from those visible walls like the Atlantic Wall to these hidden, deep underground networks. But why they exist? That strategic purpose, denying ground to the enemy, making attacks costly, ensuring your own critical functions can continue, that hasn't changed. And the way we attack them has evolved too. The basic idea of combined arms is still absolutely valid, but the arms today include air power, space assets, cyber warfare. It's a true multi-domain effort now. And that intellectual leap we talked about, Barnes-Wallis and the earthquake bombs, that set us on the path to today's smart weapons GPS, smart fuses that defeat passive strength with precision. But the drone revolution, that's the latest twist, and maybe the most significant one in a while. It forces a total rethink, moving away from just passive strength.
So what does the future look like?
Well,
More concrete, deeper tunnels.
Probably less emphasis on purely passive measures. The future seems to be about active, layered defenses. Things like sophisticated counter-drone systems, electronic warfare to jam guidance signals, maybe even things we haven't thought of yet. It's about being able to actively intercept threats across multiple domains.
Well,
we should never forget that human element. From the soldiers freezing in the Siegfried Line bunkers to the civilians trapped in Azovstal, The psychological pressure, the endurance, the morale, those factors remain absolutely critical. Future conflicts involving these kinds of environments will test human limits immensely for soldiers and civilians alike.
So what should you, our listener, take away from all this?
Well, it's crystal clear that this contest, this battle for defensive advantage, it's nowhere near over. We've gone from sheer concrete power in WWII to pinpoint underground shockwaves from things like the MOP, and now we have these tiny buzzing drones changing the whole equation. The pace of change is just relentless. Indeed it is. That cycle of adaptation, offense catching up to defense, defense innovating again, it just keeps spinning faster and faster, it seems. Maybe the most interesting thought to leave you with is this. In a world where a cheap drone can potentially threaten even the most hardened billion-dollar bunker, is there really such a thing as an unassailable defense anymore? Or has the very meaning of security fundamentally shifted? Is it now something that has to be permanently active, constantly adapting, always innovating, just to keep level?
That's definitely something to chew on. We really hope this deep dive gave you a clearer view of this ongoing, fascinating struggle. Until next time, keep digging into the details and stay curious.